What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Sunday, October 31st. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 4-game slate here tonight, and I'm just going to come right out and say it. Yesterday's picks sucked. Now, we had a bunch of value plays in that video, guys that have been playing really well, but almost all of them had letdown games. We hit on a couple of picks like Kemba Walker and Rudy Gobert. There was a few picks that did pretty well, but for the most part, man, those guys had letdown games. So let's get back into some more quality picks here. Gonna go a little bit less for all the super value plays, because when you're trying to pick out the super value plays on the slate, you're gonna have those letdown games because they're value plays for a reason. They're guys that are lower salary players that have been playing well and have a good opportunity to crush value. And I like to give you guys those picks, but I went kind of all in on those value plays last video, and it definitely burnt us. So let's get into this 4-game slate. I'm just going to start right off the bat with James Harden from the Brooklyn Nets playing the Detroit Pistons. You guys are probably saying, James Harden, Chris, are you kidding me? But just wait to the end, or wait for a second. I'll tell you why I like this pick. So James Harden from the Brooklyn Nets playing the Detroit Pistons, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 11th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. James Harden has averaged 43.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 28% usage rate. Now, he's only projected at 43.9 fantasy points here tonight, but that projection is way too low. I think he can score 50 fantasy points or more in this one, get you 5 times value or more. He's $9,900 DraftKings salary, the same price on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 215 points scored in this game, and the reason that I like this pick is because James Harden is averaging like 69 fantasy points per game versus the Detroit Pistons. He scored 78, 63, 62, 59, and 48 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Pistons. So I think this is the night that you want to play James Harden. So I like James Harden here versus the Detroit Pistons. I also like Jordan Clarkson from the Utah Jazz playing the Milwaukee Bucks, who have the 8th worst defense overall. They give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Jordan Clarkson, he's averaged 25.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 25 minutes per game with a 31% usage rate. He's projected at 25 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score 30 fantasy points or more in this one. He's $6,300 DraftKings salary, $900 less on FanDuel. So this is probably a FanDuel play for me. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 224 points scored in this game. And I like this pick because Jordan Clarkson has scored 41 and 41 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Bucks. So I like Jordan Clarkson here versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching. If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won. And we'll send you $25 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. I like CJ McCollum from the Portland Trailblazers playing the Charlotte Hornets, who have the 7th worst defense overall, they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. CJ McCollum has averaged 40.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 30% usage rate. And CJ McCollum is projected at 40.7 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.3 times value. He's 7,700 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. And CJ McCollum has scored 43 and 42 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Hornets. So I like CJ McCollum here versus the Charlotte Hornets. Okay, I also like Joe Ingles for a value play here. Joe Ingles from the Utah Jazz playing the Milwaukee Bucks. And the Milwaukee Bucks have the 8th worst defense overall. They give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Joe Ingles has averaged 19.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 23 minutes per game with a 15% usage rate. He's projected at 20.2 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score close to 30 fantasy points in this one, get you over 5 times value. He's 4,600 DraftKings salary, 100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 224 points scored in this game. And Joe Ingles, he scored 19, 25, and 31 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 31, 26, and 27 minutes. And I like this pick because Joe Ingles has scored 41, 31, 11, and 33 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Bucks. So he seems to play pretty well versus the Bucks here. So I like Joe Ingles here versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. I like Saddiq Bey from the Detroit Pistons playing the Brooklyn Nets, who have the 11th worst defense overall. They give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Saddiq Bey has averaged 34.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 23% usage rate. He's projected at 34.7 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.3 times value. He's 6,500 DraftKings salary, the same price on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 215 points scored in this game, so I like Saddiq Bey here versus the Brooklyn Nets. Now I also like Jusuf Tate from the Houston Rockets playing the LA Lakers, who have the 3rd worst defense overall. They've been pretty good versus opposing small forwards, but Jusuf Tate has averaged 22.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 25 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. He's projected at 22.4 fantasy points here tonight. I think he can score 25 fantasy points or more, get you over 5 times value. He's 4,700 DraftKings salary, 1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 224 points scored in this game, so I like Jusuf Tate here versus the LA Lakers. Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. So I like Miles Bridges, I like Giannis, but if you want to save a little bit of salary here, I like Daniel Tice from the Houston Rockets playing the LA Lakers, who have the 3rd worst defense overall. They give up the 11th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Daniel Tice has averaged 17.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 22 minutes per game with a 14% usage rate. He's projected at 17.1 fantasy points here tonight. I think he can score over 20 fantasy points in this one, get you 5 times value or more. He's 4,000 DraftKings salary, the same price on FanDuel. He scored 11, 34, and 17 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 20, 29, and 22 minutes. And he scored 28 fantasy points in each of his last 2 games versus the Lakers. So I like Daniel Tice here versus the LA Lakers. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. So this is a tough slate here tonight. It's kind of hard to find good quality players. You could go with a guy like Bojan Bogdanovic, who's averaging 26.9 fantasy points per game on the season. He's $5,200 DraftKings salary, 200 more on FanDuel, and he scored 31 and 29 fantasy points in his last two games. So I like this Utah Jazz stack. If you want to find a couple value plays from the Utah Jazz right around this $4,000 or $5,000 salary, I think that's a good way to build a lineup here tonight. So let's move on to the center position. And at the center position, I like Jusuf Nurkic from the Portland Trailblazers playing the Charlotte Hornets, who have the 7th worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing centers. And Jusuf Nurkic has averaged 34.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 24 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate, and he's projected at 34.3 fantasy points here tonight. But I think he can score 38 fantasy points or more, get you 5 times value or more. He's $7,300 DraftKings salary, 100 more on FanDuel, and he scored 29, 60, and 52 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Hornets. So I like Jusuf Nurkic here versus the Charlotte Hornets. Okay, let's see if we can get one more pick for you here at the center position. Well, this guy's coming up again, but he's on a back-to-back. Rudy Gobert is looking pretty good. He scored 52 fantasy points yesterday. He's projected at 45.6 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.4 times value. $8,400 DraftKings salary, 200 less on FanDuel. Looks like Anthony Davis, he's dealing with a knee injury, but he's going to take the court. So that's a little bit risky just because the knee injury. We don't know if he's going to play his full minutes. But I'd probably go with a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo. Although he let us down a little bit yesterday, only scored 47 fantasy points. When you're paying $11,000 DraftKings salary, you always want at least 55 fantasy points from him. But Giannis is projected at 56.6 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's $11,000 DraftKings salary, 300 more on FanDuel. So I like Giannis, but it's like giving Giannis as a pick is just kind of like silly because like he should just be a pick every single game. But Giannis is one of those guys, like I always miss him. I always seem to play him on the days that he like has like a subpar performance. And then the days I don't play him, he'll go out there and score like 70 or 80 fantasy points. So he's kind of a hard guy to nail down. He's kind of volatile player for such a high price tag. So let's get one more pick here at the center position. Let's see, what about this value play here on DraftKings? Alperen Sengun from the Houston Rockets playing the LA Lakers, and he's only $4,200 DraftKings salary. Now he's $900 more on FanDuel, but he's projected at 21.3 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He scored 26 fantasy points last game, and he played 23 minutes. But looks like, I mean, this is a high-risk, high-reward play. He scored 26, 13, and 26 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 23, 14, and 19 minutes. So pretty good point per minute production here. Let's see, yeah, he's scoring 1.17 fantasy points per minute. So if he can be on the court for 20 minutes or more in this game, He should hit value and be a pretty decent value play on DraftKings. So I like Alperen Sengun here versus the LA Lakers. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.